My name is Bonnie Fentress, and if there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's this. Some people don't break you all at once. They chip at you quietly, confidently, certain you'll never leave because they've convinced you that you couldn't do better. For a long time, my boyfriend Scott Rowlandson was exactly that kind of person. And on the night of our anniversary dinner, he still believed I was the lucky one in the relationship, the one who should be grateful he chose me. He didn't know I had already decided this would be the last night he'd get to say those words. Leonardon. The upscale restaurant he picked was glowing with warm lights and quiet music. I arrived on time. Scott, of course, walked in 45 minutes late without a hint of apology. He slid into the seat across from me, like he was descending a throne. Traffic was awful. He sighed dramatically, adjusting his tailored jacket. The jewelry on him, a gold bracelet, and an expensive watch I hadn't bought either. He didn't even look at me before adding, "You wouldn't believe who I ran into today." I already knew this was the opening act to one of his monologues. I sat still calm, like I had been rehearsing for weeks. "Daniela," he announced, smiling like he'd been waiting all day to say her name. "She just got promoted to partner. Portia, new condo, the works. She asked about you, actually." "Oh," I murmured, keeping my voice neutral. "I told her you're still, doing your thing." He waved vaguely at me as if my whole career was a dust particle floating in air. "Let's not pretend it's impressive, Bonnie. But it's fine. I don't need you to be impressive. I'm the prize here." He said it with the same casual confidence someone might use to describe their shoe size. But this time, instead of defending myself like usual, I looked him dead in the eyes and said softly, "You're absolutely right." His eyebrows flicked upward, the tiniest crack in his confidence. He wasn't used to me agreeing, not like that. He leaned back, studying me, but his ego smothered his instinct. "I mean, look at us," he said, emboldened. "Socially, I'm carrying this relationship. My connections, my family name, my looks. You're lucky I said yes when you asked to take things to the next level." I know I said again with a calmness that made his smile tighten. "In fact, Scott, I have something special for you." He perked up instantly. "Is it the Cartier bracelet I showed you?" "Better," I said, signaling the waiter. Scott watched eagerly as a silver tray approached the kind restaurants reserved for bottle service or very expensive desserts. Except on this tray wasn't a jewelry box. It was a plain white envelope. Scott frowned. "What's this?" "Open it." He tore it open with a flourish, expecting a surprise trip or tickets or something he could brag about later. But as soon as he read the header on the papers inside, the blood drained from his face. He blinked, then blinked again. "Annulment," he whispered. The entire restaurant went still. Chairs stopped moving. Forks hung midair. Even the music seemed to quiet. He looked at me confused, betrayed, furious, a child realizing the game was never in his control. "What is this?" he hissed. "It's exactly what it looks like I said. Annulment. On what grounds?" "Fraud." He stared as if waiting for the punchline. So I gave it to him. "You forgot to mention you were still legally married to someone else when we got together." His face shattered completely then. The perfect, polished, arrogant mask he wore every day fell clean off, revealing the messy truth beneath. 2 months earlier, while organizing documents for tax season, I had found a marriage certificate from his semester abroad in Spain. He'd married a woman named Carla Mendoza and never filed for divorce, never annulled it, never mentioned it. He tried to gather himself, stammering, That was annulled." "Really?" I asked, pulling out my phone. "Because the Spanish authorities disagree." "So does the lawyer I hired." His voice cracked. "It was a mistake." For 3 months, I tilted my head. "That's how long you lived with her, too." According to the apartment lease I found. Now, the restaurant wasn't just watching, they were enthralled. People leaned in. Someone whispered. Scott's breathing grew sharp. "You investigated me." "I was doing our taxes," I replied. "Your lies investigated themselves." "This is ridiculous. We'll fix the paperwork." "Why would I want to fix it?" I asked softly. "You just spent 10 minutes telling me how lucky I am that someone like you settled for someone like me." He swallowed hard. "Bonnie, I didn't mean—" "Well," I said, folding my napkin, "congratulations. You're free to aim higher now." His composure cracked so violently I thought he might knock over the table. His hands trembled. His voice rose. "You planned this." "No, Scott," I said quietly. "You planned this 5 years ago when you committed bigamy. I'm just cleaning up your mess." Then, like a final blow, I added, "And the joint card you've been using tonight, I canceled it an hour ago." Scott opened and closed his mouth like a fish, gasping for air. The restaurant was silent. Every pair of eyes on him. And in that silence, he finally understood the truth. He wasn't the prize, he was the problem. I looked at the waiter and smiled gently. "I'll have the salmon, please." It was the calmest, most expensive goodbye of my life. Scott's meltdown at the restaurant should have been the climax of the story, but it was only the opening act. The next morning, my phone rang before I'd even had coffee. Diana Rowlandson, Scott's mother, appeared on my caller ID. Her name flashing felt like a warning. I answered anyway. "How dare you," she spat the moment I said hello. Her voice had that brittle, aristocratic tremble of someone who lived her entire life shielded by generational wealth and delusion. "How dare you humiliate my son publicly like that?" "He humiliated himself by committing bigamy," I replied calmly. "That Spanish thing doesn't count," she snapped. "It was practically a college fling." "The Spanish government disagrees," I said, "and so does U.S. law." "You little snake," her voice sharpened. "You trapped him." "I trapped him. Into already being married when he got with me," I asked. "That would be quite a trick." "You don't understand what an honor it was that he chose you," she hissed. "The honor," I said slowly, "of being his second simultaneous partner, I'll pass." She hung up on me. 1 hour later, the chaos arrived, physically honking, shouting the roar of engines. I glanced out my window. 3 moving trucks, Scott, and his sister Jenna standing on my lawn like she'd been dragged into a war she didn't sign up for. Scott pounded on my door, screaming, "Bonnie, open up! This is my house, too!" I tapped my Ring doorbell and spoke through it. "No, it's not. It's mine. Bought before our non-marriage. Still solely in my name." Jenna turned to him. "You said this place was jointly owned." "It should be," he snapped, as though reality simply needed to adjust to his entitlement. "And where are my things?" he yelled. "Where is all of my stuff?" "I told you," I said through the speaker. "Jenna has them." Jenna blinked in confusion. "What? No, I don't." "Check your garage," I said to her. A beat. Then Jenna muttered, "Oh my God." Scott's face twisted. "You put my things in her garage," he shouted. "You told your sister she'd help you with anything." This is anything. Some neighbors peeked through blinds. A man walking his dog paused on the sidewalk. Scott was creating a scene, the one thing he always claimed I did whenever I stood up for myself. Projection, I suppose, is a family sport. "I decorated that house," Scott yelled, voice cracking. "You hung up 3 live, laugh, love signs," I replied. "I removed them. The walls look better now." He was trembling with rage and embarrassment, the kind that comes from losing control of a narrative you thought you owned. "I'm calling my lawyer." "Great," I said. "Make sure they know about Carla, the Spanish marriage, and the bigamy charges." Jenna stared at Scott in horror. "Scott, you were married." "That was nothing," he snapped. "A mistake." "For 3 months," Jenna asked. "A mistake you lived with." His face contorted. He looked seconds from exploding. Too late. His father's silver Mercedes pulled up like a disgraced monarch arriving to negotiate territory after losing a war. Roland, a sharply dressed man whose confidence had been dented by whispers of an SEC investigation, stepped out. He walked toward the house, adjusting his cuffs, pretending like the whole neighborhood wasn't staring. "Bonnie," he called, voice deep and authoritative. "Let's discuss this like adults." "I'm not stepping outside," I said through the doorbell. "Say what you need to say from there." He inhaled sharply, not used to being refused anything. "Look," Roland began, "this can all go away. Just remarry him. Properly this time." "Why would I remarry someone who committed fraud?" I asked. "It was a misunderstanding." "He lived with Carla," I said. "That's not a misunderstanding. That's a relationship." Roland lowered his voice. "I'll make it worth your while." A pause. 50,000. I blinked. "You want to pay me to remarry your son?" 75, he corrected quickly. "Scott didn't mean those things," he said. "You're overreacting." "He told an entire restaurant he was the prize," I said, "and that I was lucky he settled for me." Roland clenched his jaw. 100,000. "No amount of money," I said, "is worth being told every day that I'm beneath someone who committed bigamy." He muttered something about knowing people, but the threat sounded hollow. The kind of thing powerful men say when they're losing power and hoping no one notices. And then, as if entitlement had a GPS signal, the social media explosion began. Scott posted a video. Tears. Red face. Breathy victim tone. "She scammed me," he cried into the camera. "She knew our relationship wasn't valid and waited until our anniversary to destroy me." The comment section was everything. "Girl, you were already married. So he committed fraud, and she's the scammer. Didn't you post last week calling her your practice girlfriend, receipts plus size?" People dug up old posts where Scott bragged about being the catch, mocked my career, and implied I was beneath him. Someone compiled them into a montage titled "The Prize Exposed." It got 2.3 million views. And while Scott drowned in self-made public humiliation, I quietly did something far more devastating. I began returning every single wedding gift with a note. "Thank you for your generosity. Unfortunately, the relationship was invalid due to Scott Rawlinson's existing marriage to his partner in Spain. We apologize for any inconvenience. The phone call started instantly. His Aunt Margaret screamed at Diana for not warning her. Country club women whispered furiously. Family friends distanced themselves like the Rowlands carried contagion. The perfect social image Scott clung to. Cracked, shattered, done. And this was only the beginning. If Scott had any sense, he would have stopped. But entitlement doesn't go quietly. It claws, thrashes, and panics when it realizes its power is slipping away. And Scott was slipping fast. 3 days after the gift return wildfire, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Ms. Fentress, a banker, said cautiously, "There's a man here claiming to be your husband. He's demanding access to a joint investment account." I almost laughed. "There is no joint account," I said. "Yes, ma'am, that's what our system shows. We just wanted to verify." "Let him know," I replied, "that I've never been married. Legally." There was a long pause on the line, the kind that tells you a scene is unfolding on the other side of the glass. "Understood, ma'am. We'll handle it." And they did. Security escorted Scott out of the bank while he screamed about discrimination lawsuits and my lying ex. Someone filmed it. Of course they did. By that night, the clip hit 1 million views. Man claims wife, exists evidence, says otherwise. His reputation wasn't just cracked now, it was vaporizing. But the real blow didn't come from me. It came from a woman he never expected to hear from again. That afternoon, I received a message on LinkedIn from someone named Daniela Torres, the glamorous ex-girlfriend Scott bragged about at our anniversary dinner. Her message began politely. "Hi, Bonnie. I heard what happened. I thought you should know. It wasn't just you." Attached were screenshots, hundreds of them. Messages Scott sent her years ago. Lies he spun that looked so familiar it made my stomach tighten. He told her the same thing he told me, that his marriage in Spain had been annulled, that it had been nothing, that she was the one he truly wanted. She left him after discovering the truth and refused to take him back unless he explained the Spanish marriage. He never did. I messaged her back thanking her, but she replied one more time. "Women like us deserve better than men who rewrite reality. I'm proud of what you did. He won't change, but you did." It was strange to feel sisterhood with someone I'd never met. Stranger still that Scott never saw the pattern he created. He genuinely believed every woman he spoke to lived in a vacuum where his lies could grow without light. But sunlight was pouring in now. Because just when I thought his past couldn't drag him any deeper, it clawed its way up for air. Carlos. The husband Scott insisted was a mistake of fling annulled years ago. Except, Carlos was very much alive, and very much still legally married to Scott. I received a message through a Spanish legal office later that evening. "We have been attempting to locate Scott Rawlinson for formal service for over 3 years. We understand he is currently residing in your city. Divorce papers are prepared." 3 years. Scott had been avoiding him for 3 years. But the timing, that was the gift. The service was scheduled for the most poetic place imaginable, the Rowland family annual charity gala, the highlight of their social calendar, the event Diana used to flaunt her status. The one night Scott played Prince of the Ballroom. Poetic, cruel, perfect. But Scott didn't know it was coming. He was too busy spiraling. That week, he launched his most desperate move yet. He posted a teary video claiming I had emotionally abused him, that I had manipulated him, ruined his life, and weaponized a technicality to destroy love. My lawyer sent a cease and desist within 6 hours. We also included screenshots of his own text to me. "You're lucky I even look at you." Daniela would never have said that. "Sometimes I wonder what I ever saw in you. Thank God I'm attractive, or this relationship would have nothing." He took the video down, quietly. No apology. But the internet wasn't quiet. Someone dug up Scott's old posts calling me his starter girlfriend, his practice run the warm-up act before he married someone on his level. 6 years of arrogance repackaged into a 90-second montage set to dramatic violin music. It went viral. People stitched it with this. The man who said he's the prize. Bigamist energy. This dude ain't even the sample size. I didn't even have to say a word. His own digital history became his prosecution. But the moment everything clicked into place, when I finally understood the complete pattern, came from an unexpected source. Carlos himself. He reached out, not angrily, just tired. "Hola, Bonnie," he began. "I heard everything. I'm sorry you went through this. He told me he would file the divorce. He never did. He blocked me. He changed emails. He even told mutual friends I died in a car crash." I froze. Scott told people Carlos was dead. Carlos continued, "Thank you for exposing him. I will finally be able to end this chapter. For the first time, someone who'd been trapped in Scott's web longer than I had was finally getting free. And as I sat reading Carlos's message, something inside me settled. A truth I hadn't fully grasped until that moment. This wasn't just my story of escape. It was the unraveling of a man who never thought consequences applied to him. He thought he could lie, hide, belittle, manipulate, and move on untouched. But every lie has a shadow, and every shadow eventually finds light. Scott's reckoning wasn't coming. It was already here. And the worst part, the part he never saw coming, was about to unfold in front of the wealthiest, most connected audience of his life. The Rowland family annual charity gala was supposed to be their crown jewel, the night Diana flaunted sophistication, the night Rowland made strategic handshakes, the night Scott strutted around like royalty. Instead, it became the night everything they'd worked so hard to hide was dragged into the light. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. By the end of the evening, I'd seen 5 different angles of the moment online. Scott was in the middle of a crowd, holding court, with the same smugness he always carried. Silk suit, champagne in hand, smiling like he had finally regained his footing. Then a man in a dark suit approached him. Clipboard, envelope, professional. A process server. Scott Rowlandson, the man asked loudly. Scott grinned and nodded, assuming he was event staff. You've been served. Divorce papers from Carlos Mendoza. The server placed the envelope directly into Scott's hand in front of donors' board members, ex-girlfriends, socialites, and half the city's elite. Someone gasped. Someone else dropped a champagne flute. Phones were already recording. Daniela's laughter could be heard in one video, a soft, disbelieving exhale followed by, "Oh my God, karma has impeccable timing." Scott's face collapsed layer by layer. The confidence bled out. The charm fell away. The prince costume turned into a paper mask melting under a spotlight. Diana rushed forward, hissing, "Scott, smile, smile," but he couldn't, because now everyone knew. The relationship he bragged about, the fiancé he dismissed, the superiority he clung to, it was all rotten from the inside. Within minutes, the live streams spread across the internet. Gala gone wrong man. Served divorce papers in front of 300 guests. Bigamist exposed at charity event. I'm the prize guy gets served hard. And then came the interviews. Not planned, not controlled, just whispers recorded by microphones and phones. Didn't he tell people his Spanish husband died? He told me he was single. He tried that on Jenna's friend too. Diana must be mortified. Mortified was an understatement. By midnight, the Rowland family left the gala early, escorted through a back exit, avoiding cameras, Diana shielding her face as though shame itself were contagious. But humiliation wasn't Scott's worst enemy. Truth was. The next morning, a lifestyle blogger released an exclusive he claimed Scott offered voluntarily desperate to tell his side. He wanted to paint himself as a victim of a clerical error, an unfair girlfriend, an international misunderstanding. It backfired spectacularly. The blogger fact-checked him in real time. Scott said Spanish marriages don't count here. The blogger replied, yes, they do. Scott said it was a weekend fling. Your lease with Carlo was for 3 months. Scott said I was 19 and confused. You were 28, according to the government documents. When the interview dropped, the comments section annihilated him. Sir, this is not confusion. This is a pattern. Man really said, my bad, I forgot I was married. He lies like breathing. Bonnie Fentress deserves reparations just for tolerating him. Then someone found Carlos's Instagram. He had posted a picture of himself at a rooftop bar in Barcelona with the caption, finally free. The comments exploded. We support you, King Carlos. He told people you were dead. He said, what now? Carlos replied once, yes, he told people I died. I'm very much alive. That line alone generated memes for 3 straight days. The fallout spread to Scott's parents, too. The country club revoked their membership. Diana screamed at everyone she could. Rowland tried to threaten the board, but with the SEC breathing down his neck, he had zero leverage. Sponsors pulled out of the charity. A board member resigned. Their social circle shrank overnight. Scott tried to retreat into silence, but silence wasn't salvation, it was consequence. His job suspended him pending internal review. Friends ghosted. Even his gym buddies unfollowed him. And then came the final unraveling, the part of every story where the villain tries one last time to reclaim the narrative. He applied for a job, as an assistant, to Daniela. Her message hit my inbox at noon. He applied for a position at my firm. I showed HR the bigamy reports. They declined. I stared at the smiley face longer than I expected. It didn't feel petty. It felt like closure. 2 days later, I saw him with my own eyes for the first time since our breakup. A regular grocery store, not the upscale organic one he used to brag about. He was standing alone in the cereal aisle holding a box of generic flakes. When he noticed me, he froze. "Bonnie," he whispered, voice hoarse. I nodded politely. "Scott." His eyes were red, his suit cheap, his shoulders slumped. I'm sorry," he said, trying to smile, but it cracked halfway. "I shouldn't have said those things." "Which things?" I asked softly. "That you're the prize. That I was lucky you settled, that my work was beneath you." He swallowed. "All of it." I nodded again. Not cruel, not triumphant, just done. "I have nothing now," he said. "Nothing left." "That's not true," I replied gently. "You have exactly what you brought into the relationship." He blinked. I stepped closer, just enough for him to hear the softness in my voice. "And it turns out," I said, "that's not nearly as valuable as you thought." He stood frozen, clutching his box of cereal as I walked away. No revenge speech, no dramatic finale, just truth. Truth, I've learned, is quieter than rage, but far more devastating. As I left the store, sunlight hit the pavement in that golden way that feels like a fresh page turning. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. Truly free. Sometimes the best revenge isn't vengeance at all. It's simply letting someone face the mirror without you there to hold it steady. He once said he was the prize, but the reality, he was the lesson. When the dust finally settled, after the gala scandal, after the interviews, after the last desperate message Scott sent into the void, something unexpected happened. My world became quiet. Not empty, not lonely, just quiet in a way I hadn't realized I'd been craving. For the first time in years, my phone didn't vibrate with Scott's demands. No constant criticism disguised as advice. No performative apologies. No subtle reminders that I should be grateful for his existence. Instead, mornings were slow and warm. Evenings were peaceful. My mind felt like an uncluttered room with the windows open, letting in fresh air I didn't know I'd been missing. I kept waiting for the guilt to show up, the guilt women are taught to carry when they choose themselves over someone else's expectations. But it didn't come, not once. What came instead was renewal. Within a week, invitations began arriving. From friends I hadn't seen in months. People Scott insisted were bad influences or not supportive of our relationship. People he quietly pushed out of my life so my world would orbit only him. They welcomed me back effortlessly. One evening, as we sat by the river sipping wine from plastic cups, Jenna Scott's sister sent me a message. Not a long one. Just, "I'm sorry. For everything he did. I should have seen it sooner." I replied. "It wasn't yours to see. He hid it from all of us." She thanked me, and that was that. A small olive branch grown in the ruins of entitlement. Then came Carlos, not romantically, just as a human being, reclaiming his own story. He sent a selfie from Barcelona, smiling, signature cocktail in hand, a rooftop sunset behind him. His caption under the photo, "Divorced and thriving." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. I sent a message back. "To freedom." He replied instantly. "To truth." It felt fitting, two strangers connected only because we both escaped the same man's orbit, now wishing each other well from opposite sides of the world. And somewhere in the midst of all the healing, something else shifted too. I found myself spending time with someone new. Someone I'd met months ago, before things with Scott became unbearable. Someone I never allowed myself to genuinely see, because I thought loyalty meant sacrificing my intuition. His name is Marcus Hale, calm, grounded. An engineer with warm eyes and a gentle steadiness Scott never had. He never once called himself a prize. He never compared me to anyone. He never bragged to feel bigger. He just showed up, fully, honestly. One night, as we walked past a neighborhood cafe, he paused and said, "You know, your work is incredible. I've always admired how precise you are." It was such a simple statement, so ordinary, so wildly different from the daily belittling I endured before. I felt a warmth that wasn't about romance, at least not yet. It was validation without cruelty, affection without ego, interest without domination. I didn't fall for him that night. But I did fall for myself, the version of me he saw. The version I used to be, before Scott's voice grew louder than my own. People often assume big life changes arrive with fireworks, explosions, dramatic crescendos. Mine came with small things. A morning where I woke without dread. A walk where I didn't check my phone. A laugh that came easily instead of cautiously. A meal I ate without criticism being served alongside it. Freedom is quiet. Healing is slow. But peace arrives like a sunrise you didn't stay up to watch but get to witness anyway. A few weeks later, I learned Scott had moved back in with his parents. His father's SEC investigation deepened. His mother stopped hosting events altogether. Their social circle shrank until it was more rumor than reality. Scott lost his job. He deleted his social media accounts. And rumor has it he's trying to rebrand himself as a life coach, which is ironic in a way that almost defies vocabulary. But none of it matters. Not in a vindictive way, not in a triumphant way, just in a distant, irrelevant way. Scott is a chapter I've closed, not a scar, not a regret, just a story that taught me how to read myself better. He once believed I'd be nothing without him. But the truth is simpler. I was nothing with him and everything after him. Months later, I found myself back at Leonarden, the restaurant where it all began. Not to recreate the moment, not to reclaim a space, just because I happened to walk by and decided the salmon still deserved a chance. A waiter recognized me. "You look happier," he said kindly. And for the first time since the unraveling began, I realized I truly was. He seated me by the window. Warm light, soft music, no tension in the air. As I picked up the menu, I caught my reflection in the glass, not blurred by fear or doubt, not shaped by someone else's standards. Just me. Bonnie Fentress, a woman who stopped waiting to be chosen. Because choosing herself was more powerful than any validation Scott ever dangled over her head. Sometimes the most shocking twist isn't betrayal. It's who you become after surviving it. Healing is rarely a straight line. It loops, rises, dips, surprises you. But sometimes life hands you a moment, so perfectly symbolic that it becomes the point where the past finally releases its last grip. For me, that moment came on an unexpectedly ordinary Tuesday morning. I was at a small bookstore downtown, the type that smells like old paper and patience. I ducked inside to escape the sudden rain, the kind that falls in silver sheets without warning. As I wandered between shelves, a title caught my eye. Rebuilding After Emotional Manipulation. Months ago, I would have avoided a book like that. I wasn't ready to name what I had lived through, but now I picked it up, gently flipping through the pages with a strange sense of familiarity. Not pain, recognition. And that's when I heard my name. Bonnie. I turned. It wasn't Scott. It was a woman I hadn't seen in years. Lena, a coworker who drifted from my life when Scott started helping me manage my relationships, which really meant isolating me from anyone who saw the truth too clearly. She looked hesitant, like she wasn't sure I would want to speak to her. "I wasn't sure if it was you," she said softly. "You look different. Lighter." I smiled. "I feel different." She hesitated before asking, "Is everything with Scott really done? I saw some things online, but wasn't sure." "It's done," I said. "Legally, emotionally, all of it." Her shoulders dropped in relief. "I always worried about you. He had a way of dimming people." I nodded. "He won't dim me again." We ended up talking for almost an hour, catching up on the parts of life I had missed while trying to shrink myself into someone Scott would approve of. When we stepped outside, the rain had already stopped. It felt symbolic, a storm passing, leaving the world washed clean. That evening, I returned home to a quiet apartment that finally felt like mine again. Scott had never physically lived there, but his presence had lingered in the way I arranged things, the way I apologized for taking up space. Now the space felt honest. Soft lighting, warm colors, plants I remembered to water because I no longer lived in a constant state of anxiety. As I placed the new book on my shelf, my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "Dinner Friday, nothing fancy, just us." My heart didn't race with fear of doing something wrong. It warmed gently. I typed back, "I'd love that." No performance, no pressure, just a possibility. Later that night, while making tea, I scrolled through my messages and noticed one I hadn't opened. From an unknown number. My stomach didn't drop the way it used to. I opened it calmly. "Bonnie, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm sorry, for all of it. I didn't realize what I was losing until I lost everything." No name, but he didn't need one. It was Scott. Months ago, those words might have pulled me back into the cycle: hope, guilt, confusion, obligation. The traps he wove so effortlessly. Now they felt distant, like reading a line from a book whose ending I already knew. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because there was nothing left to say. Some conversations don't need closure. Some people don't need to be invited into your healed life. Silence can be an answer too. The next weekend, I found myself sorting through old boxes. Not from Scott, those had been returned long ago, but from versions of myself I had forgotten. A sketchbook from college. A camera I'd been too tired to use. Notebooks filled with ideas I abandoned because Scott once told me creative stuff is pointless unless you're naturally talented. I opened the sketchbook. My drawings weren't perfect, but they were mine. I picked up the camera. It still worked. I spent the afternoon walking through the city, photographing strangers, laughing in cafes, dogs, splashing in puddles, street performers balancing lights in their hands. None of these moments were extraordinary, and yet capturing them made the world feel bigger, brighter. I realized something then. Scott had been a chapter, but I was the author. Weeks passed, and one evening, as I sat on my balcony, watching the pink hues of sunset melt into purple, a thought came to me, gentle but strong. Freedom isn't just the absence of someone, it's the presence of yourself. Scott once believed he was the center of the universe, and I was lucky to orbit him. But now, I was a constellation of my own, a whole sky he never bothered to look up at. As I closed my eyes, letting the last warmth of the sun touch my face, I felt something I thought would take years to return. Peace. Not the fragile kind that breaks when someone raises their voice, but the deep kind that comes from rebuilding yourself on your terms. And in that moment, the story didn't feel like one of betrayal or humiliation. It felt like one of rebirth. A story of a woman who walked through fire and came out gold. A story of someone who stopped surviving love and started choosing it with intention. A story that didn't end with a man leaving, but with a woman returning to herself. My name is Bonnie Penaflor, and I am 36 years old. I had been married for 8 years, had 2 children, one 6, one 4, and a life that from the outside looked painfully ordinary in the safest way possible. We owned a decent house in the suburbs, both our names on the mortgage. I worked full-time as a civil engineer, long hours, stable income. My husband, John Penaflor, worked in marketing. He'd always had charm. People gravitated toward him easily. I used to think that was one of his best qualities. For months, though, something had felt off. Nothing obvious, nothing I could point to and say this is the problem. Just small things. The way John angled his phone away from me when he texted. How his work lunches started happening more often, always vague, always rushed. How he'd come home energized in ways that had nothing to do with me. I told myself I was imagining it. 8 years together should earn trust, not suspicion. Last Saturday night, John went out for drinks. He called it a casual work thing. Wine coworkers, nothing major. He came home around 11, tipsy but functional, laughing too loudly, overly affectionate. He kept telling me how much he loved me, how lucky he was. I helped him get ready for bed. He passed out almost instantly. Sunday morning, I was making coffee when he shuffled into the kitchen, pale, squinting at the light. Ugh, he groaned, dropping into a chair. Did I really say that last night? I didn't turn around. Say what? I don't remember half of what I said, he muttered, rubbing his temples. I didn't say anything stupid, did I? Here's the thing. He hadn't said anything. Just the usual drunken rambling about coworkers' complaints, nothing memorable. But the way he asked there was something underneath it. Fear. Not embarrassment. Fear. So I took a gamble. Still facing the counter, still pouring coffee, I kept my voice neutral. You don't remember telling me about Laura. Silence. I turned around slowly. John's face had gone completely white, not flushed, not sheepish, white. What did I say exactly, he asked. I shrugged. You tell me. You brought her up. I was drunk, he said quickly. I didn't even know what I was talking about. It's nothing. Then why do you look like you're about to pass out? His eyes filled. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears sliding down his face. It's not what you think. What do I think? We're just friends, he said. She's my ex, but we work together. Sometimes we grab lunch. That's it. I sat down across from him, calm, still holding my coffee. Keep going. And guilty people always do. Over the next hour, I barely spoke. John did all the work himself. It went from just friends to texting sometimes, from nothing inappropriate to some flirting, from we kissed once to it happened a few times. By the end, he admitted to a 4-month emotional affair that turned physical. 6 weeks earlier. Multiple times. Her apartment. Lunch breaks. His friends knew. Covered for him. When he finally stopped talking, he looked at me with desperate hope. But you already knew, right, he said. I told you last night, so we can work through this. I set my cup down. You didn't tell me anything last night, I said quietly. I guessed. The moment he realized what he'd done, I watched something inside him collapse. You tricked me, he whispered. No, I replied. I asked one question. You answered it for an hour. He started screaming, calling me manipulative, cruel, a monster. The irony was lost on him. I grabbed my keys and left. That was 6 days ago, and nothing has been the same since. I drove to my sister Margaret Penaflore's house without really thinking about the route. Muscle memory took over while my mind stayed stuck in the kitchen, replaying John's face, when he realized he'd confessed to everything without being directly accused. That moment haunted me, not because I felt guilty, but because I saw how quickly he shifted from panic to anger, from shame to blame. Margaret didn't ask many questions when I showed up with an overnight bag and hollow eyes. She hugged me, once firm and grounding, then made tea and let me talk when I was ready. I told her everything slowly, clinically, as if recounting a case study instead of the collapse of my marriage. She listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening with every detail. "You didn't trick him," she said when I finished. "You gave him space to lie or tell the truth. He chose the truth." I stayed in her guest room that night. I didn't sleep. By morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop. John's name filled the screen over and over again. When I didn't answer, the messages started coming, long, rambling texts, swinging wildly between remorse and accusation. "I made a mistake. You set me up. I was drunk. You're cold. You didn't even fight for us." By noon, his mother entered the conversation. She called me directly. "How could you do this to him?" she demanded, not even bothering with a greeting. "He's devastated. You humiliated him." "I didn't humiliate him," I said evenly. "He cheated." "Men make mistakes," she snapped. "They don't always handle emotional needs well. John was lonely. You work all the time." I felt something harden in my chest. I worked to support my family. He chose to have an affair instead of talking to me. "Well," she said sharply, "marriage takes forgiveness. So does accountability." She hung up on me. John's friends started texting next. Subtle at first. "Everyone messes up. Don't throw away 8 years. You're overreacting." One of them even suggested I should be grateful he'd confessed instead of hiding it better. That was when I understood something important. None of them were angry about the affair. They were angry that it had consequences. 3 days later, I agreed to meet John at the house to discuss logistics, clothes, schedules, the kids. I told Margaret where I was going, just in case. When I walked into the living room, John was already there. So was his mother. "An ambush," Bonnie John said quickly, standing up. "Please, let's talk like adults." His mother didn't wait. "You need to stop this nonsense and work on your marriage." "With respect," I said, keeping my voice level, "this isn't your business." "It is my business when you're tearing apart my grandchildren's family." John stepped closer. "Baby, please. It was one mistake." "It was dozens of decisions," I said. "Every text, every lie, every time you went to her apartment and then came home and kissed our kids." "Our marriage wasn't perfect," he shot back. "You were distant. So you slept with your ex-girlfriend instead of asking for counseling." At the word counseling, his eyes lit up like he'd been thrown a rope. "Yes," he said quickly. "We can do counseling. I'll do anything." "I don't want counseling," I replied. "I want a divorce." His mother stood up abruptly. "You're being cruel, vindictive. This isn't the Christian thing to do." "Neither is adultery," I said quietly. I gathered my things and headed for the door. That's when John said it, the sentence that stripped away any remaining doubt. "If you divorce me," he said coldly, "I'll make sure you never see those kids." I turned around slowly. "Did you just threaten me?" His expression shifted instantly. "That's not what I meant. I'm just saying, courts favor fathers less. And if you're going to be difficult—" "I'm recording this conversation," I said calmly. "Have been since I walked in. Keep talking." I wasn't recording, but the fear on his face was real enough to satisfy me. His mother sputtered. "That's illegal." "We're in a one-party consent state," I said. "Look it up." I left without another word. That night, I sat on Margaret's couch and typed out everything timestamps, exact wording, context. I emailed it to myself, backed it up, and started a file. The next morning, I scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney. I wasn't emotional anymore. I was done being naive. The attorney's office smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner, the kind of neutral, forgettable scent meant to keep emotions from lingering too long. Her name was Rachel Whitman, mid-40s, sharp eyes, calm voice. She didn't waste time with platitudes or false comfort, and I realized within minutes that I needed exactly that kind of honesty. She listened while I laid everything out, the affair, the confession, the threats, his mother's involvement, the children. I handed over the notes I'd already started documenting. She skimmed them once, then looked up at me with quiet approval. "You did the right thing starting this early," she said. "Most people wait until things explode." I asked her the question that had been gnawing at me since I left the house. "Does the affair matter emotionally?" "Absolutely," she replied. "Legally. Less than people think. You're in a no-fault state. Asset division will likely be close to 50-50. Custody is where behavior matters." That stung, even though I'd expected it. 8 years of marriage reduced to math and statutes. She explained the likely outcomes: the house would probably need to be sold, equity split, retirement accounts divided, custody starting point would be 50-50 unless one parent could be shown to be acting against the children's best interests. I'm not trying to take the kids away from their father, I said quickly. I just want out, with my dignity and fair access to my children. Rachel nodded. That mindset will help you. But you also need to understand something: contested divorces turn ugly fast. People do things they never thought they'd do. I thought of John's threat at the door. I've already seen that, I said. Then document everything, she continued. Every interaction, every message, every comment the kids repeat. Assume everything you say could end up in front of a judge. When I left her office, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from clarity. There was no going back now, no pretending this was a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with apologies and counseling sessions. This was a process, a long one, and I needed to be smarter than emotional. I went back to the house 2 days later to pick up more clothes and discuss schedules. I told John I'd come alone and expected the same courtesy. He agreed. He lied. His mother was there again, sitting stiffly on the couch like she owned the place. The conversation started civil enough, if tense. Drop-off times, school schedules, who would keep which car. Then it slid inevitably into blame. "You're acting like I'm a monster," John said, voice tight. "I told you the truth." "You told me because you thought I already knew," I said. "There's a difference." "I was lonely," he snapped. "You were always working." "And I was faithful," I replied. "That was my choice." His mother leaned forward. "You're punishing him instead of fixing your marriage." "I'm accepting reality," I said. "He didn't make one mistake. He made dozens. And he only stopped because he got caught." John's expression hardened. "So that's it? You're just done?" "Yes. You're throwing away our family." "No," I said quietly. "He did that. I'm just not pretending otherwise." That was when he tried again, softer this time. Counseling, church, time apart without divorce. Anything that didn't involve consequences. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. I stood up, gathered my things, and left. That night I added another entry to my file. The next morning Rachel called. "We should file," she said, "before he does something reckless." I agreed. The papers were prepared within days. When John was served the following Monday, the calls started immediately. 17 missed calls in 2 hours, voicemails bouncing between sobbing apologies and furious accusations. His mother called next, then his sister, then his father, who surprised me by sounding genuinely remorseful, apologizing for his son's behavior and saying he understood why I was doing this. Apparently that conversation triggered a massive family fight, but John's response told me everything I needed to know. He didn't think this was real. He thought I would break. He thought I would come back. He was wrong. 3 days after the divorce papers were served, my phone rang at work. It was Human Resources. The woman on the line sounded careful, professional, the way people do when they're about to say something that could derail your life. She explained that an anonymous complaint had been submitted, alleging that I was having an inappropriate relationship with a coworker and that it was creating a hostile work environment. For a moment, I honestly couldn't process the words. Then the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The complaint was detailed enough that HR had no choice but to investigate. Dates, locations, implications. They wouldn't tell me specifics policy, but they said I'd be placed under review while they conducted interviews. I sat through 4 days of quiet scrutiny. They interviewed me. They interviewed the female coworker I was supposedly involved with. She was mortified, confused, furious. We'd barely spoken beyond project updates and emails. They reviewed calendars, email logs, building access records. There was nothing, because there had been nothing. When HR officially cleared me, they apologized for the stress and confirmed that a formal report would be filed stating that the allegations were unfounded. I asked if they could tell me who had submitted the complaint. They couldn't, anonymous system. But everyone knew. Rachel documented it immediately. "False allegations during a custody dispute are not a good look," she said calmly, "especially when they mirror the accusing party's own behavior." That was the moment I realized John wasn't just angry. He was retaliating. The next blow landed closer to home. During one of my evenings with the kids, my 6-year-old climbed into my lap, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Mommy," he asked, "why don't you want to be my mom anymore?" My chest cracked open. I held him tightly and told him the truth, in the only way a child could handle it, that I would always be his mother, that I loved him more than anything, that sometimes parents lived in different houses, but love didn't change. Later that night, I wrote down exactly what he'd said: the date, the time, the context. Rachel had warned me about this subtle parental alienation. Not outright lies, but carefully phrased sadness, meant to make the kids feel abandoned by me instead of confused by the situation. And then came the police. 2 officers showed up at Margaret's house one evening, polite but serious. John had reported that I'd stolen his laptop jewelry and $2,000 in cash when I moved out. I handed them the photos I'd taken the day I left, clear images of the items I'd packed, timestamps included. I explained the divorce, the ongoing dispute. They took notes, asked a few questions, and left. One of them paused at the door and said quietly, "Seen this before. Get a good lawyer." I already had one. The officer's report noted there was no evidence of theft and that I had documentation of my belongings. Another entry in the file. What John didn't realize was that every move he made was building a pattern. False accusations, weaponizing the kids, abuse of systems meant to protect people. And then the final piece fell into place. Margaret's husband worked in the same office complex as John, different department, same building. 2 weeks after the police incident, he sent me a photo taken in the parking garage. John and Laura, kissing next to his car. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 days after the divorce filing. I forwarded it to Rachel. She didn't smile often, but this time she did. "This helps," she said, "not with assets, but with custody." John was still seeing his ex-girlfriend, still lying, still trying to paint me as unstable while actively proving the opposite. Our first custody hearing was scheduled for the following week. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I was trying to protect my children from being used as weapons in a war he started. And this time I was ready. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not just in temperature, but in atmosphere. Everything echoed footsteps, voices, the scrape of chairs, as if the building itself was designed to strip emotion down to its barest form. I sat beside Rachel at the long table, hands folded, spine straight, reminding myself to breathe. John sat across from me with his attorney, his posture rigid, jaw clenched. He didn't look at me once. His mother sat behind him in the gallery, already shaking her head like the verdict had been decided unfairly before anyone spoke. John's attorney went first. She painted a familiar picture, one I recognized instantly as carefully curated. I was emotionally distant, career-focused to the point of neglect, a mother who prioritized work over connection, a wife who had psychologically manipulated her husband into confessing to something he was ashamed of. According to her, my entrapment proved. I was cold, calculating, and vindictive, and therefore unfit for significant custody. I listened without reacting. Rachel stood next. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She laid out facts. 12 documented incidents of subtle parental alienation over 5 weeks each, with dates and context. The false HR complaint and the company's written report clearing me of wrongdoing. The false police report and the officer's notes confirming no theft. Screenshots of John's messages threatening to keep the children from me. And finally, the photograph. The judge studied it in silence. "Mr. Penaflor," she said at last, looking directly at John, "are you still in contact with this individual?" His attorney stood. "Objection." "Overruled," the judge said calmly. "Answer the question." John swallowed. "I've seen her a few times. Just to talk. Work-related." The judge slid the photograph forward. "This image shows you kissing her in a parking garage 2 days after your divorce filing." "That was taken out of context," John said weakly. The judge's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. She'd seen this before. Too many times. The ruling came faster than I'd expected. Primary physical custody would be awarded to me. The children would live with me during the school week. John would have them every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. Any further attempts at alienation would result in a custody review. John's face collapsed. His mother stood up in the gallery, shouting about bias and injustice until court security escorted her out. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Asset division followed the standard path house to be sold. Equity split. Retirement accounts divided. I was ordered to pay modest child support to John for the time the children were with him, a figure far lower than he'd demanded. "That barely covers groceries," John snapped. The judge looked at him coolly. "You work. You have earning capacity. This support is meant for the children's needs, not your lifestyle." Outside the courtroom, his mother cornered me in the parking lot. "You ruined his life," she hissed. "He ruined his own life," I replied evenly. "I just stopped covering for it." "You manipulated him." I gave him a chance to tell the truth. You'll regret this. I got into my car without another word. That night, I tucked my children into beds that weren't in the house they'd grown up in, but were safe, quiet, mine. For the first time in months, I slept. The divorce wasn't final yet. There was still a mandatory waiting period, but all the major decisions had been made. On paper, everything looked clean and orderly. In reality, my life felt like it had been shaken out and put back together by someone who didn't know where all the pieces belonged. I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from the kids' school. It was smaller than the house we'd sold, but it was quiet in a way I hadn't realized I needed. No tension humming in the walls, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. The kids adjusted unevenly, which I expected. My 6-year-old acted out at school for a few weeks, short-temper trouble focusing. My 4-year-old asked almost every night when Daddy was coming to live with us again. I answered honestly but gently every time, even when it felt like my heart was being scraped raw. Daddy has his own home now, I'd say, but he loves you, and I love you. That doesn't change. John and I communicated strictly through a co-parenting app, exactly as the custody order required. No texts, no calls, unless it was an emergency. He tested that boundary constantly, long, emotional messages about how I was poisoning the kids against him, how inflexible I was being, how he couldn't believe I'd done this to us. I responded to none of it. I replied only to logistics, drop-off times, permission slips, doctor's appointments. Rachel told me that silence used correctly was powerful, not as punishment, but as protection. John didn't see it that way. He told mutual friends I was cold, calculated, that I'd planned this all along, that I'd wanted him to fail. Some believed him. Some quietly stopped returning his calls. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. A month after the custody hearing, John made things official with Laura. Public posts, smiling photos, a caption about finding happiness after hardship. The audacity almost made me laugh. Almost. Margaret showed me the post once, carefully watching my face. I felt nothing. Not anger, not jealousy, just confirmation. He hadn't been confused. He hadn't been lost. He'd been choosing. The financial reality hit slowly. Half my retirement savings gone. Attorney fees that wiped out what little cushion I'd had. Child support payments going out every month, even though the kids lived with me most of the time. It hurt, but I'd stopped equating money with loss. The divorce would be finalized in a few weeks. The paperwork was already drafted, waiting on time more than decisions. Some nights after the kids were asleep, I sat on the balcony of my apartment and let the exhaustion catch up with me. Divorce wasn't just emotional, it was logistical, financial, relentless. There was always another form, another adjustment, another reminder of what had been dismantled. But there was also peace. No more lying awake next to someone I didn't trust. No more questioning my own instincts. No more shrinking myself to keep the illusion of harmony intact. I wasn't free in the triumphant cinematic sense. I was free in the quiet, survivable one. And that was enough. The divorce became final on a Tuesday morning I almost forgot about. No courtroom. No dramatic confrontation. Just a digital notification from my attorney confirming what had already been emotionally settled for weeks. 8 years reduced to a stamped document and a series of obligations that would stretch on for years in smaller, quieter ways. I stared at my phone for a long time after reading the message, waiting for some overwhelming emotion to hit. It didn't. What I felt instead was fatigue. Bone-deep, honest exhaustion. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. School mornings, packed lunches, homework at the kitchen table, weekends that alternated between chaos and stillness, depending on whose turn it was. The kids slowly stopped asking when their father was coming back to live with us. They started asking instead what was for dinner, whether they could have friends over, if we could go to the park. Normal questions. John and I remained bound by the co-parenting app. He continued to test boundaries, slipping an emotional commentary where logistics were required. You're turning them against me. You always wanted control. I can't believe you did this to our family. I never responded. Silence wasn't cruelty, it was consistency. Laura appeared occasionally at drop-offs, after that lingering too long, smiling too brightly, as if daring me to react. I didn't. She wasn't the villain of my story. She was just a chapter that revealed who John already was. Friends filtered themselves naturally. Some drifted away, uncomfortable with choosing sides. Others stayed quietly, bringing groceries, offering childcare, sitting with me when the nights felt too long. I learned who valued me without conditions. One evening, my 6-year-old asked a question that stopped me cold. Mom, he said carefully, did Daddy lie to you? I didn't answer immediately. I chose my words with the same care I'd used in court with doctors with lawyers. Yes, I said finally, he did. Is that why you don't live together? Yes. He thought about it for a moment, then nodded. I don't like lying. Neither do I thought. That night after they were asleep, I reflected on everything I'd learned, not in the abstract, inspirational way people talk about growth, but in the practical, bruised sense that comes from surviving something you didn't choose. Trusting your instincts isn't paranoia. Documenting reality isn't manipulation. Asking questions isn't cruelty. I hadn't destroyed my marriage. I'd uncovered the truth about it. The affair, the lies, the threats, the false accusations, the attempts to turn my children into leverage. None of that happened because I asked a question over coffee. It happened because John believed I would never ask. I lost half my savings. I lost a house. I lost the future I thought I was building. But I gained clarity. I gained peace. And most importantly, my children still had two parents who loved them. One who made mistakes, and one who refused to pretend those mistakes didn't matter. That was the quiet truth. And it was enough. My name is Margaret Schneider, and I'm 33 years old. If you had told me even a month ago that my life would fall apart in a single evening, right in front of the people I loved most, I wouldn't have believed you. I used to think disasters came slowly in quiet, accumulating moments, but sometimes they arrive all at once like a match, tossed into a room soaked in gasoline. Last Thursday was my older sister Kendra's 36th birthday. My whole family had gathered at my parents' house, warm lights, glowing voices, overlapping the familiar smell of Mom's roast chicken filling the air. It should have been peaceful. It should have been simple. But Jason had other plans. He'd been simmering all week. Something about one of his coworkers getting a promotion while he'd been overlooked for the 5th time. I'd spent 5 years with him. I knew the signs when he was about to spiral, the tight jaw, the snappy remarks, the sudden superiority complex that masked the fact he felt small. I tried to tread lightly, but sometimes even light footsteps land like thunder. At dinner, Kendra was telling everyone about the new electric truck she'd just bought. Her construction company had been booming. She worked herself to the bone for it, but Jason never gave her credit for much. He was the kind of man who called other people lucky when they succeeded. He'd already had a couple glasses of wine by then. So nice. Jason cut in loudly, swirling his glass like he was hosting his own talk show, having money to burn on toys, while some of us work actual stressful jobs. Kendra blinked slowly. Well, it's a work vehicle, and the company's doing great this year. Mm-hmm. Jason leaned back, smirking. Wish Margaret would take notes. Might help her career. The room quieted just a little, those subtle, stiffening silences families try to ignore. I kept my voice calm. Jason, not now. That was all it took. He slammed his hand on the table hard enough to rattle the cutlery. No, Margaret. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how your sister manages to run an entire company while you sit at home playing with code all day. I'm a software developer. I work from home. I make good money. But Jason always framed it like a hobby instead of a career. He turned sharply toward Kendra, pointing with an unsteady finger. That his voice cracked from the wine, that's what a real woman accomplishes. Success. Drive. Not whatever you do. Mom gasped so softly most people didn't hear it. Dad didn't move, but his jaw tightened like it was clamped in a vice. Mark, Kendra's husband, stared at Jason with a look that read, "You're digging your own grave, buddy." And Kendra? Her expression was somewhere between pity and outright disgust. Jason wasn't finished. "You're completely worthless, Margaret." His voice rose slurred, triumphant in the ugliest way. "I should have gone after someone like Kendra instead. She actually has her life together." Silence. Heavy, suffocating, humiliating silence. Kendra looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. My father set his fork down with delicate precision, like the alternative was to throw it. My mother whispered my name under her breath. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. Something inside me, something that had been fraying for years, finally snapped clean. I took a slow sip of my wine, set the glass down carefully, and said only one word. Probably. Not loud, not angry, just done. Jason blinked, confused that I wasn't exploding the way he expected. I rose from my chair. Everyone watched, still frozen. "I'm leaving," I said quietly. Jason scoffed. "Oh, come on, Margaret, don't be dramatic." He had no idea this was the opposite of dramatic. This was clarity. I walked out of my parents' dining room, out the front door, into the cool night air that felt like the first full breath I had taken in months. 10 minutes later, I was driving home. 20 minutes later, I was packing 2 suitcases, my laptop, and my development workstation. 30 minutes after that, I placed my key on the kitchen counter beside a note I wrote with a steady hand, "You're right, you deserve better," and I'm done. That night, I found a furnished studio apartment on Craigslist. By morning, I was gone. But here's what Jason didn't know, and what would soon turn his entire world upside down. For the last 3 years, the enormous personal loan he'd been bragging about managing on his own, the one he whispered about late at night, terrified of defaulting sick from the stress, drowning in interest. Kendra had been paying it every month, directly, over $87,000 so far, and she hadn't done it for him. She'd done it for me. Because 3 years ago, Jason had been drowning, and I, naive and hopeful, had begged my sister for help. I called it a business arrangement. She called it family looking out for family. I promised her I'd repay every cent with interest. I had been funneling nearly everything I earned back to her, quietly, secretly trying to bridge the gap between the man Jason pretended to be and the man he actually was. I thought someday I'd surprise him. I thought it would prove my love. I thought he would see my worth. But instead, he stood in front of my family and called me worthless. The irony of that is almost poetic. I didn't know it then, not yet, but this was only the first fracture. The real break was coming. And when it did, Jason would discover exactly how much worth he had been living off all along. I woke up the next morning in my tiny studio apartment, staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize. For a moment, I felt the old instinct, the one that told me to check on Jason to make sure he hadn't spiraled, to brace myself for whichever version of him I'd get that day. But then I remembered. I didn't live there anymore. The quiet around me wasn't tense. It wasn't loaded. It wasn't waiting for an explosion. It was just quiet. I made ramen for breakfast, sat cross-legged on the floor, and let myself exist without performing someone else's emotional labor. It felt strange, liberating, wrong, almost like I was breaking a rule I'd been following for so long, I forgot I had written it myself. By noon, the storm had begun. Jason called 6 times, then 10, then 22. I didn't answer. By evening, the calls stopped. But the text notifications didn't. Jason, where are you? Seriously, Margaret? This isn't funny. We had a fight. Couples fight. Pick up the phone. Jason, you embarrassed me last night. My coworkers were there. What do you even think they thought of me? Jason, you're being childish. Come home. There it was. He was shifting through the stages: self-pity, anger, guilt-tripping, entitlement. I'd seen the cycle enough to predict the next turn. But nothing prepared him for what happened next. Because at 7:42 p.m., Kendra sent him an email, a formal email, from her company's official letterhead. Later, she forwarded me a copy. I didn't ask her to, but I'm glad she did. Reading it felt like watching a dam break in real time. Subject: termination of loan arrangement. From Kendra Schneider. Schneider. Contracting and Bilto. Dear Jason, per Margaret's request, I am formally terminating the loan repayment arrangement established 3 years ago. As of today, a total of $87,000 has been paid on your behalf toward your private personal loan. Attached, you will find a complete payment ledger and the new repayment schedule. The first payment of $200 is due on the 1st of the month. Regards, Kendra Schneider. Schneider Contracting and Build Co., President and Founder. Jason's response was immediate and predictable. First call, second call, 15th call, then the text came in a flood. Jason, what the hell is this? Margaret, answer me right now. Jason, your sister is lying. She's trying to destroy us. Jason, why would you let her do this? Jason, you should have told me. You should have told me you were doing something this insane behind my back. Behind his back. As if he hadn't been the one drowning in loans he refused to properly face. As if I hadn't stretched every part of myself to keep him afloat. I texted him once. All communication through lawyers. Contact info to follow. It was the verbal equivalent of slamming a vault door shut. And Jason did not handle locked doors well. Within an hour, he switched strategies from rage to desperation. Jason, Margaret, please, just talk to me. I didn't know. I didn't know your sister was paying. Jason, we can fix this. We always fix things. Jason, you know I love you. I was drunk. I didn't mean anything I said. There it was. The apology that wasn't an apology. The plea that wasn't about me, only about the consequences crashing into him. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. But I didn't reply. Instead, I called Kendra. She answered on the second ring. You okay? She asked softly. I wasn't, but I was also more okay than I had been in years. He's unraveling, I murmured. He's been unraveling for a long time, she said. You just finally stepped out of the blast radius. I breathed out slowly. Thank you for everything. Kendra hesitated. Margaret, I need to ask, are you sure you want me to push this? Because this won't just sting for him. This will crush him. And he's not the type who handles crushing well. I know, I said. But he spent years relying on me while pretending he didn't need me at all. He humiliated me in front of our family while secretly living off my sacrifices. A long silence. Then Kendra said, then he needs to learn who he's been calling worthless. I closed my eyes. For 3 years, I'd been paying her $200 a month, $900 for Jason's loan, plus the $300 interest she insisted on, so I wouldn't feel like I was taking advantage. For 3 years, I hid overdraft fees, skipped lunches, canceled plans, and picked up extra freelance work just to keep up. Meanwhile, Jason posted inspirational quotes about self-made success on Instagram. He had no idea how much of that success had my fingerprints all over it, and now he was about to find out. Jason tried one more tactic that night, a voice message sent at 11:58 p.m. I didn't want to listen. I did anyway. His voice cracked as he spoke. Margaret, please, I'm begging you. I can't pay that. I don't have that kind of money. You know I don't. Please don't do this. Please don't destroy me over one mistake. One mistake. It was almost funny. Not the ha-ha kind of funny, the kind that sits in your chest like a stone. I put my phone face down, crawled into the unfamiliar bed, and for the first time in years, I fell asleep without waiting for the next explosion. Because now the explosion wasn't mine to hold. It was Jason's, and it was coming fast. Jason did not go quietly into accountability. My silence did to him what oxygen does to fire. By Monday morning, Kendra's formal invoice had landed in his inbox, and the consequences hit him exactly the way she predicted, sudden, violent, inescapable. I was brushing my teeth in my little studio when my phone started vibrating on the counter like it was trying to escape the room. Missed calls, voicemails, texts, unknown numbers, blocked numbers. I ignored all of them. Then my phone buzzed again, this time from Kendra. Kendra, he knows. Buckle up. 5 minutes later, the unraveling began in full force. At 9:13 a.m., my coworker messaged me a screenshot. Apparently, Jason had decided to take his meltdown public. He posted an entire essay on Facebook claiming he'd been the victim of secret financial coercion and long-term emotional manipulation. In his version of events, I had convinced him to let Kendra take control of his debts, and now I was abandoning him and ruining him financially to teach him a lesson. Within minutes, the comments poured in. Men go through abuse too. Wow, she sounds controlling. Good for you for speaking up. You deserve better, Jason. If I hadn't lived through the reality, I might have believed it too. He always was talented at performing his way into sympathy. But then everything shifted. Because a half hour later, Kendra commented on his post. She didn't argue. She didn't insult him. She didn't explain anything. She simply wrote, "Here are the receipts for 36 months of loan payments I made at Margaret's request. She was trying to protect you from defaulting because you were having panic attacks. She depleted her savings to keep you afloat. You're welcome." And then she attached screenshots, every payment, every month, all the documentation. Silence hit that comment section with surgical precision. One by one, the supportive replies slowed, then stopped. Some disappeared entirely. Others were replaced with cautious remarks, or people untagged themselves and backed away like the social media thread had suddenly caught fire. Jason didn't comment again. He didn't need to. His narrative, the one he had built so carefully, crumbled beneath him in real time. By Tuesday morning, he tried a different tactic, showing up at my office. He marched into the lobby demanding to speak to Margaret immediately, claiming it was a family emergency. He made enough of a scene that security escorted him out. The receptionist called upstairs, shaking, worried I might still be involved with that angry man downstairs. When my manager asked me to come into his office, I felt the familiar panic rise in my chest. I was so afraid Jason's chaos would cost me my job. But when I showed my boss the separation paperwork and the messages from Jason, he nodded sympathetically. "Take the rest of the week off," he said. "We've got your back." I didn't realize how badly I needed someone to say those words out loud. By Wednesday, Jason's tone had shifted again. His Facebook sob story wasn't gaining traction anymore. People had started asking uncomfortable questions he didn't want to answer. And so, like clockwork, he pivoted back to rage. He posted on Instagram about fake family loyalty, made vague threats about exposing the truth, and even tried accusing Kendra of trying to bankrupt him out of jealousy. He underestimated how quickly Kendra could shut that down too. Rather than engage, she simply posted the contract. Yes, the literal contract he had signed 3 years ago, agreeing to her loan payments as a private arrangement between him and me. Signed. Dated. Clear as day. Jason went unusually quiet after that. But his silence didn't last. That evening my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a message. It was my neighbor Frank, the 80-year-old Korean War veteran who lived next door to me. "Margaret," he said, his voice gravelly but calm, "your man is outside the door yelling your name. Should I call the cops?" Before I could answer, I heard the pounding. "Margaret, open the door." Jason's voice echoed through the hall. "We need to talk like adults." Frank didn't wait for my reply. "All right, that's enough," I heard him bark. "It's 6 p.m., and you're causing a disturbance." Jason snapped something back. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sharp and disrespectful. Frank called the police on the spot. When the officers arrived, they issued Jason a formal warning for disturbing the peace. Officer Martinez gave me a brief, knowing look as Jason argued with the other officer in the hallway. "Crazy ex?" he asked softly. I nodded. He let out a sympathetic exhale. "You'll get through it. Just keep documenting everything." By Thursday morning, Jason had changed strategies again. This time, he contacted my company's HR department, claiming he was still my emergency contact and that there was a family crisis. HR called me immediately. "Is this accurate?" they asked. "No," I said. "Please remove him permanently. He should have no access to any information about me." "Should we document this attempt?" "Yes, please." I hung up and sat still for a long moment. Jason wasn't just panicking, he was thrashing. Desperately, blindly, violently, like something that had lost the illusion of control and didn't know how to function without it. By Friday, he had one card left to play his parents. His father, Robert, called me that afternoon. A kind man, one of the few in Jason's orbit who never tried to make excuses for him. "Margaret," he said, voice heavy, "my son is a mess. He's saying something about loans and your sister, and I don't understand any of it. Can you tell me what's going on?" So I did. The dinner. The humiliation. The loan arrangement. The 3 years of payments. The invoices. Everything. Robert listened in stunned silence. "He really said you were worthless?" he finally asked, sounding more wounded than angry. "He did," I whispered. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "I didn't raise him like that." We spoke for nearly half an hour, and at the end of the conversation, he sighed. "He's brought this on himself, Margaret. Maybe it's time he learns that actions have consequences." I didn't expect that, not from him. But by the end of the week, the consequences were only just beginning. By the time week 3 rolled around, Jason's life was collapsing faster than even I expected. It wasn't the drama or the screaming or the social media fights that finally broke him. It was the cold, unavoidable math of his own debt. His loan servicer auto-debited the full amount, $2,847. His account had $1,200 in it. The overdraft fees alone were enough to send him into another spiral. And right on schedule, Kendra's automatic invoice system sent him the payment request for $2,200, now with late fees since he hadn't paid the first one. He called me, called again and again. I didn't answer. The voicemails came next. "Margaret, you know I can't afford this. You're doing this on purpose. You set me up. You and your sister planned this. I swear to God, if you don't fix this, I'll take everything in the breakup. Everything." There was no breakup agreement. We weren't even married. He knew that. He was just drowning. And drowning people often try to drag down whoever is closest. I texted only 2 words. "Lawyers only." He didn't reply, not for hours anyway. Instead, he escalated again. At 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, he showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door so hard the hinges rattled. "Margaret, open up. We need to talk like adults." His voice was hoarse, wild, already cracking. My neighbor Frank opened his door wearing slippers and a faded military sweatshirt. Lady Frank grumbled, pointing a finger at Jason. "It's 6 in the damn morning. Shut up or I'm calling the cops." Jason snapped, "Mind your own business, old man." Frank didn't even blink. He picked up his phone, dialed 911, and told the operator Jason was disturbing the peace. The police arrived quickly. Jason was given another official warning. I got a sympathetic nod from Officer Martinez, the same one who came last time. He said quietly, "Document everything, Ms. Schneider. Men like him don't implode once they implode repeatedly." I believed him. By Wednesday afternoon, Jason had decided to weaponize HR again. He called my company pretending to be my emergency contact and claiming there was a family emergency. But HR had already flagged him in the system. They notified me immediately, apologizing for the inconvenience. Should we formally restrict him from receiving or requesting any information they asked? "Yes," I said, "please, and document this too." They did, and Jason was left with one less door to bang on. But Thursday was when he tried to get clever. He called a real estate agent and attempted to list the house for sale. There was only one problem. Both our names were on the deed. The agent called me directly. Ms. Schneider, your partner seems to believe he has sole authority to sell the property. I'm calling to confirm whether that's accurate. It isn't, I said calmly. We are separated. He has no right to list anything without my consent. The agent exhaled with relief. I suspected as much. Thank you for the clarification. 10 minutes later, Jason texted, "You're blocking me from selling my house now." Unreal. Unreal. Lawyers. I didn't answer. Later that night, scrolling through Instagram, I saw something that almost didn't register at first. Jason had posted a video. He was smiling, forced, wild-eyed, standing in our living room. The same living room whose mortgage I had stopped paying. The caption read, "Divorce Party. Celebrating freedom from toxic women. New beginnings." It took everything in me not to laugh. 40 people packed into a house he could no longer afford. Music blasting. People clinking glasses. Jason bragging loudly on camera, pretending he'd been the one to leave me. But the universe has perfect timing. Because right in the middle of his toast, his phone rang. He put it on speaker, grinning as if he was showing off. "Hold on, guys, the bank's calling." A woman's voice crackled through the speaker. "Hello, Mr. Adams. This is First National Bank calling about your mortgage payment." He froze. Someone laughed, thinking it was a joke. "It appears the payment was returned for insufficient funds. The account holder has stopped payment." His fake smile evaporated on camera. "What, my girlfriend? My ex. She's the one who, she always—" "I'm sorry, sir," the woman continued. "Your mortgage is now past due. You have 30 days to bring the account current, or we will begin collection proceedings." The room fell silent. Someone even shut off the music. You could hear every breath Jason took, short, panicked, sharp. The camera stopped recording seconds later. Kendra sent me the clip at midnight with a single message, hauntingly satisfying. But the fallout didn't end there. Friday morning, my phone buzzed again, this time from Robert Jason's father. "Margaret," he said, sighing into the receiver. "He came over last night crying. I've never seen him like that. He's saying you're trying to make him homeless." I didn't sugarcoat anything. "Robert, he humiliated me in front of my family, called me worthless, and now he's facing the financial responsibilities he spent years pretending didn't exist." There was a long pause. Then Robert said quietly, "Good. Maybe it's time he grew up. I love my son, but he's had this coming for a long time." Something softened in my chest at those words. Support from his father meant more than I expected. But the week wasn't over yet. The real break, the moment everything shattered beyond repair, was still coming. And when it did, Jason's entire world would collapse under a truth he never imagined. 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks of Jason cycling through every emotional tactic he'd ever used on me, amplified, desperate, distorted. Some days it was rage. Some days it was begging. Some days it was long, rambling emails about what we meant to each other, as if he hadn't detonated our relationship in front of everyone I loved. But nothing, not his shouting, not his crying, not his silence could change the one fact he kept trying to outrun. Life was no longer subsidized by the woman he called worthless. By week 3, the financial wreckage had fully landed on him. His second loan payment of $2,847 auto-debited, another overdraft, more fees. Then the second invoice from Kendra, this time $300 with late fees, the mortgage notice, the credit cards, the reality that his monthly obligations were nearly $8,000 while he brought home half that. He tried negotiating with Kendra first. He showed up at her office unannounced, apparently planning to charm her or guilt her, or do whatever he usually did to avoid responsibility. He didn't even make it past the lobby. Her secretary, who has seen more of Jason's nonsense than I ever realized, told him he needed an appointment. He refused. Security escorted him out. That night, he emailed Kendra a heartfelt plea about family loyalty, and how could you choose sides like this? She replied with one sentence. "You chose sides when you humiliated my sister." He didn't write back. When legal threats didn't work, he tried a lawyer, paid the consultation fee with his last functioning credit card. The lawyer reviewed the documentation, the signed agreement, the payment records, the invoices, and told him plainly he owed the debt. The house had to be sold. He had no grounds for anything. He fired that lawyer, hired another. Same result. He fired her too. Reality refused to bend for him. The house sold quickly below market because he needed the cash, now, not later. After the mortgage was settled and fees were paid, there was barely anything left to split. We walked away with $11,000 each. My portion felt like an exhale, not wealth, just independence. His portion felt like salt in a wound. The divorce uncontested because he had no leverage, finalized quietly. Just signatures and silence. For the first time in years, there was nothing left for him to manipulate. He tried playing the victim for a while longer. Friends sympathized at first, but then the truth spread. Screenshots circulated. People connected dots he had hoped would stay blurry. One by one, they drifted away. Even his mother stopped defending him. Only his father, Robert, still checked in, not to comfort Jason, but to make sure I was all right. It was strange finding kindness in a place I expected hostility. Then one night, Kendra called me out of the blue. "Hey," she said, sounding tired but lighter. "I just sent Jason an official letter forgiving the remaining debt." I nearly dropped my phone. "You? What?" "It's done," she said simply. "Paid in full. Zero balance. He owes nothing." Why the word came out before I could stop it. "Because holding his debt means staying connected to him," she replied, "and I refuse to let him drain you or me one day longer." I let that sink in. She wasn't doing it for him. She was doing it for me. There was one problem, though, one Jason hadn't realized yet. Forgiven debt is taxable. In April, he'd owe the IRS nearly $20,000 in taxes. That was a storm waiting quietly in the distance. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not anymore. Just distance. Like watching lightning from a window, aware of the danger, but not standing in it. A day after the debt forgiveness letter, Jason sent one final text. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed my life over one drunken comment." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back, "No, Jason, I didn't destroy your life. I exposed it. The destruction was already there. You hid it under $87,000 of my sister's money. You called me worthless, but you lived off my worth for years. The only thing I took away was the illusion." Then I blocked his number. Not out of anger, not out of bitterness. Out of peace. A strange, quiet peace that felt like a deep breath I'd been holding since the day I met him. In my tiny studio that night, I made ramen again. Steam rose from the cup. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the evening light drifting in through the blinds. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't victory, but it was mine. For the first time in years, every dollar I spent belonged to me. Every choice I made belonged to me. Every quiet moment was my own, not stolen or overshadowed by someone else's chaos. I thought about Kendra, her strength, her blunt honesty, her unwavering loyalty. I thought about my parents, their silence that night, followed by their gentle texts checking in on me. I thought about Frank, the neighbor who stood up for me without hesitation. I thought about Officer Martinez assuring me I'd get through it. I thought about Robert, who finally admitted his son had been coddled too long. I thought about the small handful of friends who said, "We're proud of you." And I realized something my therapist would later put into words. I had spent years trying to earn worth from someone who had none to give. Now I didn't need anyone to assign me value. I had it on my own. Later that week, I went out for coffee with someone new. Not a rebound, not a romance, just a gentle conversation with a man who listened when I spoke, an accountant, ironically enough. When I told him the story, he blinked and said, "That wasn't financial abuse. That was financial sacrifice. You didn't enable him, you saved him." For once, the comment didn't sting. It didn't twist my stomach with shame. It just felt like the truth. I walked home afterward, the city warm and quiet around me, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I wasn't replaying the dinner or the insults or the invoices. I was finally free. I opened the door to my apartment, kicked off my shoes, sat on the floor with another bowl of ramen, and smiled as I took the first bite. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful. It was mine. And after everything I'd survived, that was worth everything.